Arusyak, and I will be responding to Diego's claim. He claims that giving college athletes the opportunity to play for money would benefit both the players and schools. His secondary claims are the cost of living and attending aren't fully covered by the scholarships they're given, so they would need extra money. College athletes are forced into lower standards of living when they're the ones that put in the work and bring in the money for their school. And the last secondary claim is that paying athletes would bring in more talented and competitive players. The evidence isn't a lot to convince you that, but it would be nice to pay athletes, although it wouldn't really benefit them. According to John Thelen, the full scholarship is $65,000, and if they were paid $100,000 salary, it would sound impressive, but it's a salary and it will be taxable. It would be subject to federal and state income taxes. Also, tuition and college expenses wouldn't be deductible because the income level would surpass the IRS eligibility limit. The student athlete paid a salary would owe $23,800 in federal income tax and $6,700 in state taxes, a total of $30,500. Income taxes would be then $32,900. And as an employee, the player would have to pay at least $2,000 in other taxes, such as Social Security, for a total of $34,900. This would leave the college player with only $65,100. And since the tuition was $65,000, he would only be left with $100 extra money. According to the federal tax code, the $45,000 from the tuition money is deductible, but the $20,000 for board and books are not. The student athlete will be able to deduct the book expenses and qualify for a tax credit under the American Opportunity Tax Credit, reducing his tax. And there would be no local payroll tax because he wasn't an employee, it was a scholarship. This means that the $64,380 of the scholarship given to him would go toward paying academic expenses of $65,000. It's also bad news for the athletic department, which paid $100,000 in salaries, but if they paid scholarship in $65,000, the expenses wouldn't be up to $35,000, whereas the difference for the athlete would be only $100. It's clear that paying salaries for college players is a taxing situation, and each case is different for different states. But this example is for Kentucky, which has a moderate tax rate. In his second claim, he claims that college athletes are not paid, and their coaches are paid millions of dollars. But it's not really relevant and doesn't support the argument, since coaches have more experience. And he claims that not enough time is given to athletes to find a job. The students who are given the same time spent it working, earning money for their tuition, while athletes spending most of their time at the field get to do something they love, master the skills they need to go pro, and in return they get rewards of free professional coaching, strength and fitness training, support from athletic trainers and physical therapists. If they didn't get the scholarship, they would pay $2,000 to $3,000 per week for similar training, the weeks leading up to their pre-draft workouts. The evidence of NCAA making money and the coaches making money is irrelevant because it doesn't show what the money is being spent on. The $6 billion used, he doesn't give evidence what it's used on. He also claims that paying athletes will get rid of the pay-for-play mentality, but in reality it would just create more problems because athletes would join for the money. Paying athletes would actually have the opposite effect, and it wouldn't bring in more talented and competitive players. It would bring in more people who need money. The reasoning of this claim is flawed, since according to the NCAA, college sports are more about the academics rather than the profit, a concept that will take a 360-degree turn if money comes into the equation, because everybody would probably go for the money now. Traditionalists also argue that college sports are designed to foster true sportsmanship and not so that athletes can make profit. In one of his sources, the NCAA also stated that paying athletes undermines the purpose of college. which is education. Student athletes are not employees, and their participation in college sports is voluntary. In conclusion, using these evaluations and adding in the value of a scholarship, a student athlete is receiving a package of education, room, board, and coaching, training worth between $50,000 and $125,000 per year. It will be impossible from the tax standpoint to pay them more, and it will create more problems as people will join for the money. Thank you.
All right, organizationally, you start off pretty well identifying the claim and the secondary claims. When you get to the first point, you basically respond to that whole first point with a hypothetical about how much an athlete might be paid under a system similar to what the advocate seems to think would be a good idea. And I thought that you did a nice job suggesting that there's not really going to be a substantial economic advantage to an athlete to do so by presenting a scenario where they got $100,000 being paid for what they had. They then would have to pay their own scholarship, they'd have to pay for their education, they'd have to pay taxes on what they've got, they have all these sorts of things that diminish the significance. So it comes down to barely $100 difference. And I don't remember that the advocate specified a particular amount, but I thought that this was an interesting way to try and show and put it into context that this is not going to be a substantial benefit to the athletes in the long run, although it might appear to be, because it puts them in a completely different classification, and that introduces all kinds of extra complications. I did think that it was nice that you explained that these were predicated on a pretty average sort of situation in Kentucky. All right, the second point I thought gets to some of the key issues here. You want to be careful because there are some value issues built in here. The idea that they are gaining something substantial from their participation in college athletics that they don't have to pay for currently, but they would have to pay for if they were paying for this, like if they were just the average Joe looking to get trained to play in the NFL or the NBA or whatever it happened to be. I thought that was pretty reasonable. Your question about what the money is being used for that the NCAA and the coaches get, well, I think the coaches, they use the money however they want. That's their salary. But the NCAA, that's easy to demonstrate. They support all kinds of other athletic programs with their schools. All of those colleges are what they're called not-for-profit colleges, so they have to pay for all of their resources and other students' activities based on the income that's being brought in by that. So I think that would have been an interesting way to maybe go at this argument and say that this money is, when you're talking about how it's being spent, what it's being spent on is something that benefits a substantial number of other athletes who are not necessarily the high-profile athletes, but also attend school and get scholarships and do those sorts of things. Let me see. Like I said, you do get a little bit close to some value arguments because we're talking about what the purpose is of having athletics in school anyway, and you're talking about the issue of sportsmanship, and I think that those are valid arguments for a policy claim. And since this is kind of a pseudo-policy claim, it's not that they're inappropriate to present here, but I do think that they sort of veer off of the real topic, which is what the need is. And the thing that I think is missing the most from your argument is any discussion of what the advocate's discussion of need is. Are there particular problems that athletes face? How significant are those problems? Your argument is basically that this problem wouldn't solve it, but it doesn't really address whether or not that problem exists in the first place, and I think that there ought to be a little bit more discussion of that. All right, thank you.